Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really interesting passage from the Bible.
That's right, 2 Chronicles chapter 6.
Exactly. And we're trying to figure out how this, ancient wisdom can actually give you some perspective on life today.
And maybe even strengthen your faith. That's kind of the goal, right? To
Yeah.
find those connections.
Yeah, those sort of aha
Yeah.
moments. We've got the text itself and some reflections on it, so let's jump in.
Okay. So the context is Solomon dedicating the temple in Jerusalem. A huge deal.
A massive project, yeah. He just finished building it, something his father David had dreamed of.
Right. And the first thing Solomon does is basically point to God's track record.
He stands up and says, look, God kept his promises to my father David.
He's acknowledging that history of faithfulness. It's not just about the building.
It's like saying, this project succeeded because God was faithful.
And that act of remembering, it's powerful. Think about your own life, maybe prayers answered in the past. When you're facing doubts now, you can look back at that personal history. It's real evidence, you know?
That's a great point, like having receipts for faithfulness.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, so after acknowledging that, Solomon offers this dedication prayer, and it's public.
Very public. He's asking God to, well, make the temple his dwelling place, a central spot for hearing prayers.
But it's not just a general please listen, is it? He gets specific.
Oh, very specific. And the things he asks for show, I think, a real understanding of, like, human life.
Like what?
Well, forgiveness for personal sin, for when individuals mess up,
Okay.
help when the whole nation is in crisis,
Yeah.
things like famine or defeat in battle.
Right, national level problems.
And this is pretty amazing. He asks God to hear the prayers of foreigners, too. People not part of their community who come seeking God there.
That inclusion part,
Yeah.
we should come back to that. It feels important.
Definitely. He also prays for restoration after repentance.
So if they mess up, personally or as a nation, and they turn back.
If they turn back, he asks God to hear them and restore them. It's this idea of a pathway back.
A U-turn is possible.
Exactly. It offers hope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That things can be set right again.
That whole cycle of repentance and restoration, it feels timeless.
It really is.
Mhm.
Think about today, personally, societally. That need to admit mistakes, change course, seek renewal, it's still right there.
Okay, let's circle back to the prayer for foreigners. How unusual was that, really, for that time?
Well, you know, ancient societies could be quite exclusive, so praying specifically for outsiders to have their prayers heard at their sacred center, that's quite something.
It's just a God whose concern isn't just limited to one group.
Precisely. It challenges you even now, doesn't it? To think about how welcoming, how inclusive your own faith perspective is.
Yeah, it really does. Makes you think about who faith is for.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the temple itself, this physical, sacred space. We might not have that exact thing today, but what's the takeaway?
I think it's about the principle of having a dedicated space or time for connection, for reflection.
So not necessarily a huge building, but intentionality.
Right. In our crazy busy lives, carving out that quiet corner or that regular time slot just for focusing on your spiritual life, it gives you that grounding.
A bit of perspective and peace amidst the chaos makes sense.
Yeah. A way to intentionally step aside from the noise.
And Solomon's prayer, it's not shy, it's bold, wouldn't you say? Expectant.
Definitely. He lays out these scenarios, sin, drought, enemies, foreigners, and directly asks for God's intervention and mercy. He's not hedging his bets.
There's a confidence there.
Yeah, confidence in God's willingness to hear and act. It encourages a similar, maybe, boldness in how you approach prayer, trusting you'll be heard.
Trusting in God's compassion.
Exactly.
So let's try to tie this together. We've looked at the history, the prayer points. How does reflecting on all this actually strengthen your faith right now?
Well, first, seeing God's faithfulness proven in the past, like with the promise to David that Solomon highlights, that builds trust for today.
Right. If God kept promises then.
It gives you a solid reason to trust. He'll be faithful now, even when things look uncertain. It's like having that track record.
A foundation to stand on.
Exactly. And then the whole emphasis on prayer, repentance, restoration, it gives you a practical path.
How so?
It means when you face struggles or when you mess up, there's a way forward. There's an invitation to pray, to turn back, to seek restoration. It builds resilience.
It's not just about feeling bad, it's about having a route back.
Right. It offers real hope in difficult times.
And the inclusivity aspect we talked about, the prayer for foreigners.
Understand that God's love isn't limited, that access isn't restricted. That can be hugely encouraging personally. It counters any feeling that maybe you're not in enough or good enough,
It reinforces that sense of belonging for everyone.
which strengthens your individual connection and, the wider sense of community.
And finally, the idea of sacred spaces or times.
Making that intentional space in your life, like we said, it becomes an anchor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a practical way to ground yourself, reflect, remember what's important, and just connect. It reinforces your spiritual core, finds you some peace.
So this deep dive into 2 Chronicles 6, it's shown that this ancient prayer isn't just a history lesson.
Not at all.
The themes, God's faithfulness, prayer, turning back, inclusion, intentional reflection, they're all really relevant.
Incredibly relevant for strengthening faith today. They're kind of timeless principles, aren't they?
Yeah, seems that way. They offer guidance that still works.
Absolutely. Foundational stuff.
So maybe the question to leave you with is this. How can you take the spirit of Solomon's prayer into your own life this week?
Good question.
Where could you lean more into trusting God's faithfulness, maybe be a bit bolder in prayer, or perhaps think about inclusivity in a new way?
Or even just carve out that 5 minutes of quiet space.
Right. These ancient words, they're really an invitation, aren't they? To go a bit deeper in your own connection, something to think about.